Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Ni hao. Following the Australia-China summit held in Cairns, today we're wanting not so much to, go over the issues, but more particularly to look to try and start the process of teasing out what are the information gaps and needs that are related to those issues, and also hopefully through the course of the day and starting with this session this morning to start to try and give some priority onto what those information needs are. I'm going to be assisted with it by a number of people on stage here, and I'd like to call them up in no particular order as I introduce them. First of all is Frank Geisermacher, who is the Manager Commercial China, or for China Southern Airlines rather. He's been involved with the aviation industry since the Wright brothers. He studied and worked in Europe, US and the Middle East, and for the last 14 years has been associated with China Southern Airlines, and through that role he's travelled extensively through China. Welcome. Thank you. Therese Phillips is Director of Industry Innovation with Tourism Queensland. Therese has owned and managed a number of small businesses, worked with a major tour company in Europe. She's lectured in schools and universities in many parts of the world, and she's worked with Tourism Queensland for the last 10 years, and particularly in that role with tourism businesses across the state. Don Jolly is the Principal of Global Tourism Solutions, which is involved in training and development of the tourism industry, particularly for those involved in new markets. Before that, he represented Tourism Queensland in Australia, Europe and Asia, and had a senior position with Tour East, a major inbound tour operator who is based in Singapore with a focus on Asian and Chinese markets into Australia. Don is also the part-time manager of South East Queensland for the Australian Tourism Export Council. We have Adele Labine-Romain, the National Manager for Research and Projects with the Tourism and Transport Forum. Before coming to Australia 2 years ago, she was heavily involved in consulting and government work across the tourism spectrum in Canada, and through her role on the board of the Canadian chapter of the Travel and Tourism Research Association. And finally, we have David James, who is Director of Tangalooma Island Resort. David is one of those people I refer to as an industry pioneer and champion in the development of the China market, and through the extensive experience he's gained over many years, he's been very successful in the China market, not only in the sense of the great results he's achieved for his own company, but also in sharing that experience for the benefit of the wider industry. Ladies and gentlemen, I think particularly with the presentations this morning, we've seen a major swing from west to east in terms of the market to Australia and the increasing potential market for Australia. And that, quite frankly, is taking a lot of the participants in our industry out of their comfort zone. And I'd like to sort of start from that point. And start to try and tease out again, what's the real issue, what are the learnings that we can get, and what's the sort of information that we really need to try and overcome those issues or impediments. And perhaps, David, as you are the last one I introduced, I might like to ask you, what are your, observations relative to supplier engagement with the China market, and what are the learnings we can get from that and the learnings we need to help overcome it?
No problem. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, John. I think, first of all, one of the things that is noticeable in these conferences is there's an incredible amount of wealth of research, market trends, and understanding the market. As an example, could I just get a show of hands of any Australian tourism products that are here? Hotels, attractions, tour operators. The Bernie from Accor, Miramar, Maroochydore. 3? 4? We've got 4 Australian companies wanting to target the largest potential tourism market in the world. So I guess my point is, how do you engage the industry to get access to this research that is relevant for their business. And that's, I think, the key. I think later on this afternoon, Dr. Claire Liu from Hospitality School of Tourism in Auckland will be presenting her work that she did in a study in New Zealand. She invited 250 companies in New Zealand online to do a survey in the Chinese market. Out of those 250 companies, 39 companies responded. Of that, 17% of those companies actually had a plan for China, yet it wasn't very sophisticated. 83% of the companies didn't have any plan specific for China at all. So Dr. Liu, sorry for plagiarising your work already, but I think that's very, very relevant for the Australian industry, and it's one area in Australia we probably don't embrace and do too well at the moment, and that is learning how to engage this research which is provided to us. So that would be my first part. The second part would be how to develop your companies in Australia. I still see today companies going to China to produce or to introduce their products and attractions, some great professional things we have in Australia. They have brochures in English still. Some of them have traditional Chinese brochures when they go to mainland China. Now some of those companies are starting to employ Chinese sales staff, but they don't have Chinese-speaking frontline staff. So that all comes back down to a quality experience. And it's all back to this investment in tourism. So probably my biggest 2 points in engaging the China market would be that, getting access to that research and how do the state tourism organisations, the RTOs and Tourism Australia encourage that, and where are the benefits for the Australian industry to encourage that? Where are they spelt out?
Would any other panel care to comment further on the issue? Don?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think, and I'm not surprised there's only 4, because unfortunately I think the industry perception has always been that low-end packaged product that's been packaged out there, and of course there's very little margin in it. So I think that's been the perception of the industry, that that's all there is to the market, even though it's dramatically changed, and that upmarket end is coming in. So with that research, I'd probably agree with David and say that maybe the industry, the supply side, needs to be maybe focused on that upper end package of what's to a small degree is happening but will grow significantly in the future, to say that's why it's so attractive. It's not just a profitless volume market, even though that's perception. So we need to get over that. I think that's a critical step, to get the suppliers on side. Once we get them on side, then we can start to look at products, translations, training of staff in languages, and I can talk about that a bit later.
Therese.
Firstly, bear with me. 你们好，欢迎您 Brisbane, 我是 Phillips. I can put my piece of paper away now. Tourism Queensland has been working for a long time. Katie Mills is our wonderful manager looking at this market, and we've been taking industry over to China through our China program for 9 years. Yes? So I guess one of the things we found just in the past little while is that the interest has been growing. So Tourism Queensland has a China project that we're going to be working on next year to try and address some of these issues. We have been fabulously lucky as an outcome of the floods and the cyclones in Queensland for the Department of Resources, Energy and Tourism to provide us with money to engage TravConsult to work directly with our industry. Now, one of the benefits of that is that it's money that we don't currently have within our budget, and the other benefit is that in excess of 300 businesses across the state are now receiving some China awareness and cultural development. Businesses that are both currently working in China and businesses that have never really thought about it. So I think that the journey that people spoke about in Cairns, that starts with one step, we have been on that journey for a little while. It's been fairly focused, but we certainly do acknowledge that we need to get these issues to the front line, and I think through Project China in the next year we'll be doing that.
Frank, working for a Chinese company that is expanding rapidly in I guess, providing access to Australia with the increased services that have been announced, have you got any observations to make on this of the engagement by the Australian industry?
Thanks, John. From what I've heard today and from what I know, there is an enormous engagement, and Tourism Queensland and TA are doing great work in China to get tourists here. China Southern Airlines is also, as you said, expanding rapidly. We went from 3 flights a week 10 years ago to 24 flights at the moment. And President Tan's idea is that we'll have 100 flights a week, certainly by 2020. However, the big obstacle that we find is visas. And we're talking about increasing the economic level of people, getting wealthier people to come here as individuals, but that is almost impossible for them to do. Unless they are sponsored by a person in Australia, not one person can walk up to the consulate in China and say, or the Australian consulate in China and say, I want to travel to Australia. It's just not possible. The visa application, I went online the other day and had a look at the Australian Embassy. There are a number of forms that you have to fill out. One of them is 18 pages. The forms must be completed in English. And then there's a second form of 12 pages. And some of the questions are, you must give details of all your family members living in your home country and abroad, including half, step and adopted brothers, sisters and children. And on it goes. So, I think it's something that tourism has got to talk to immigration and try and sort this out. I'll give an example. China Southern first flew to Brisbane in 1997. And this is, from my recollection, when ADF was first approved. Wayne, you mentioned 98, then you mentioned 99. Regardless of that, we would have 180 passengers booked on a flight to come from China. 3 days before departure, 30 of those passengers would get a visa. Consequently, after only 7 months, the airline gave up and withdrew its services until all of that was sorted out. Now, visas have become easier, but in order to come here, you must go to an accredited travel agent in China, who will then organise all the transport and visa arrangements for you. And that's why you're getting a certain level of person and not the richer or the wealthier Chinese person who wants to come here on his own and do his own thing.